Hi, and welcome to session 2. In this session, we're going to continue working with our events to start working with some mouse events. How do you make the page react to your mouse clicks? Let's get started. There's a lot of information on this page, but I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the events and some of the properties that occur with a mouse. So mouse events are used whenever you use your mouse and do something, whether you move around your page or you click or you hover over an element. Mouse events are going off all the time. It's really important to keep track of your events as you move along. Mouse events have a little bit different properties than, say, keyboard events or just loading and clicking events. The mouse does things a little different. It knows where it is kind of a big thing. So if you look over on the event properties on the left side, you'll see that there's a client X and a client Y. This is the X and Y coordinates in pixels of where the mouse is when the event occurs. So remember, we passed the event object. The event object in this case is the mouse, because the mouse is doing something, and we can reference the different properties of what the mouse is doing. Where is it, and what do we want to do therein? In the example code here, we have said we want to change some code on the page, in the inner text of where are you, your location, to be the horizontal and vertical position of your mouse every time you move it, so that it'll change constantly as we're moving around the page. This is just one more thing you can do with a mouse. So mice have the different properties associated with them. They can even tell you which button you clicked. So this is how you can react differently if it was the left button or the right button or the wheel or the middle button. So that gives you some options with your mouse. Some of the mice events would be mouse down, mouse up, mouse click, mouse over, mouse out, mouse leave, so on and so forth. And select if the text is selected by the pointer. So if we've selected a section, we want to know what the select information is. So these are different things that we can do with our mouse events. Okay, so we are going to handle the mouse down event, that when we click down on a specific cell, it'll change the background for us, because we need it to know which background color we're going to use. So in this case, we are going to use a global variable for our cell background. So I'm just going to throw that up with my other global variable and use that down here. All right, so inside of our setup puzzle here, we have set our background style to this yellow, so this RGB. In this case, we're actually going to set it to the result of a function. So we are going to come down here to background color and go there. And then we are going to say the mouse down is going to be an event. That event is going to change the color as well. So we are going to say puzzle cell I, because we still want the same cell. And we want to do the on mouse down event, because we're going to go to mouse down event when you click the mouse down. And we're going to use the function set background. So we're just using it like a function that we can pass through like that. Now we have to go build our set background function. So this is going to be our event handler that's going to handle the event. So this is the function that's going to be called when you click the mouse down. So function set background. And it's going to pass an E. Now, mouse down event sends you the E, or the event, which is the mouse event, so that we can access that inside, and it always knows that. So I didn't have to put parentheses here or do something along this line up here. It knows that this needs to be a event that takes an E. So we're setting an E. And we're going to do set background, and we're going to set our cell background equal to the RGB, in this case, 101, 101, 101. Anybody have an idea what 101, 101, 101 is? Because it's not like you haven't seen that one before. And we are going to take the event target, so the target of our mouse. We're going to set the style and the background color equal to our cell background. Now in this case, our cell background is going to be that gray. So if I save and refresh, I come over here and I click down, See how it changed it to black, that gray. Every time I click, it changes the background on me. Okay, I can click it again and still stay gray because right now that's what it's doing. So we're going to be selecting different colors to see what our solution is. It's going to look something like that eventually for that puzzle. For this one, we're going to be, it's kind of like saying, this is where I think the mine is. This is where I don't think the mine is for Minecraft or my Minesweeper. Okay. We've talked a little bit about events, but we haven't really explained to you the event model. So in an event model, as you know, everything in JavaScript is object-based. So we start with our window object. Inside of our window object is contained our document object, our DOM. Inside of our DOM, we might have a section. We might have a header. We might have an aside. We might have an article, something like that. So we have another section there. And then we might, inside of that, have an image or a figure or something along those lines. Every time the code goes through, events go through multiple phases. First, they start in the capture phase, and they start at the top, up at the window. And they look and they go down to the document and they're like, I'm in the capture phase. Anybody need me here? Okay, wait, keep going. Okay, I'm in the section now. I'm still in the capture phase. Anybody need me? Oh, wait, I'm still not where my target is. Keep going. And it goes all the way down into wherever it's supposed to be. In this case, it's target. And it stops being in the capture phase and it goes to the target phase. It says, cool, finally found where I'm supposed to be. Coolness. Okay, deal with whatever I have to do in my target phase. Then, when you are done, it then bubbles back up or propagates back up to the root. So you end up in the bubbling phase on the other side. Capture phase goes down until you hit the target, and then it goes back up in the bubbling phase. Event handlers tend to only respond to events during the target phase. However, they can do things inside of the other phases. We can choose to move around and say, I'm in the bubbling phase, ignore me, don't worry about me here. I'm in the bubbling phase, I want you to handle me, do something with me, so on and so forth. It's also important to recognize that each event handler can only handle a single function at a time. You can't say onload function 1, onload function 2, because onload will be assigned to function 2 and function 1 will just get lost. You have to create like maybe a third function that does function 1 and then function 2 and call that one if you want to. But you can't have two different event handlers doing the same event on the same element at the same time. Can't have two. One will get overridden by the other. So now you understand the concept that we're in an event model, and that goes down through the capture phase, hits the target, goes back up. We have concepts called listeners, and listeners are designed to listen for an event that occurs in a specific location. So the listener is what's listening around. It's sitting there all the time going, anybody talking to me? Do I need to be known? Do I have to do something? I'm just going to listen for events, and I'm going to keep track of everything that occurs down through the capture phase to the target phase and back up. Different functions can react to different events in different phases. So you can have listeners at your window phase. You can have a listener at your document phase, and you can add a listener at your element phase. And each of them can react differently. When you add an event listener, you need to know 3 pieces of information with an optional 4th. The first is the object. Which object should the event occur in? Am I doing this just in the window where I'm just loading the window? Am I doing this in a button? Am I doing this in the DOM? Am I doing this in just the document? Where am I listening? So you need to tell me where I'm starting. So where's my starting point? Where's my object that the event should occur in? The second is the event. What's going to occur? Is it going to be a mouse? Is it going to be a keyboard? Is it going to be a load event? Is it going to be a focus event? What type of event is going to occur? So I have to figure that part out. Next is the function. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do if I find this event? Do you want me to run a function? What's that function going to be? The example down here is the idea of being able to add 2 event listeners. You can't do it with handlers, but you can with event listeners, which is another story. And then the capture. So the capture is optional. Do you want it to be done during the capture phase, or do you want it to be done during the bubbling phase, or do you just want it to happen in the target phase? If you leave the capture off entirely, it'll just happen in the target phase. If you put it in there, you have to put either true or false, and it'll tell you if you want it to do during the capture or the bubbling phase. So other than event handlers, event listeners, like I said, can have the same event with different functions. You can have multiple listeners that do multiple functions on the load event. That's okay. You just can't have multiple handlers. You can have multiple listeners, though. Listeners, remember, listen for an event and then run the function being the handler. You can also add code to remove a listener. So you've written code to add listeners. We're going to say window, add listener. When it loads, run this function. Coolness. But after that, maybe I don't want it to happen anymore. Maybe I'm going to have some, if you click this button, the world's going to change and I'm going to change my whole page, and I don't want to listen for that button anymore. So I can remove that event listener off the button and say, don't listen to that event anymore. When you want to control your event propagation. So sometimes you want to prevent what would normally be the default action. You will recognize the default action because it's what defaults the program. So you're writing your code and you're adding event listeners and you're adding your handlers and you're doing fine, except after you clicked the button, because of where you clicked, there was another reaction. So it was supposed to change the color, but it also clicked and ran another piece of code. Well, I don't want it to run that code. I want to stop propagating. I don't want to do the default values. So these are options that you have. You can say, I don't want to propagate all the way back up in my bubbling phase, and I don't want this element to, or this event to do its default. I want it to just run the code that I told it to do, but don't do whatever your default is. So like the default of multiple select is that you click through your mouse and then you hold down the control button and you can click something else. That's a default. You don't even have to write an event handler for that. It's done automatically. Well, what if I don't want it to do that? What if I want it to do something different? So I can tell it, don't do your default. I know you want to, but just don't. Let's go see why we would do that. We now need to handle our mouse enter event with a mouse listener. So when we enter our puzzle cells, so when I move my mouse over them, I want to do a mouse listener on that as well. So I'm going to come back to my set background function here, and I'm going to go ahead and add an event listener for my cells as well. So up here, in my set background, this is to handle, if you click and hold down and move around, we need to do things a little bit different. So I'm going to create an event listener for every puzzle cell in this situation where I have set the background. So I've done my mouse down. My mouse is clicked down. Now I can handle this with my listener. So I'm going to say create event listener for each puzzle cell. Okay. For I equals 0, this should feel familiar, semicolon, I is less than puzzle cells length. This is why we wanted that puzzle cells to be a global variable so that I could use it throughout, because I'm going to use it in a lot of different places, and I++. So in this case, I'm going to create a listener that is going to handle each cell. Okay, puzzle cells, I, add event listener, on mouse enter. Remember, all lowercase for mouse events, comma, and we're going to do extend background. We're going to write that function in just a second. Colon, semicolon. Okay. Oops, I have an extra 0 on there. Okay. Now I got to go write that function. Remember, I just said I was going to write it. Function extend background. And I can pass my E because the mouse enter is also taking an E. And I'm going to say E target style background color equals that cell background. And yes, I spelled color wrong there. Okay. What this is going to do, if I hit save, click, mouse down, and then move. See, I don't have, my mouse is still down. I haven't changed it, and I can move around. As soon as my mouse back up, we have to get rid of that part. We haven't handled that yet. So right now it's still doing everything. So we're going to do handling when the mouse is no longer down. So now we want to remove an event listener. We've created this event listener and now it's listening all the time and we really want it to knock it off because I don't need it all the time. I just need it while I'm clicking, and then as soon as my mouse goes up, then I want to tell it not to. So we're going to add this remove event listener to our initialize because we want to add this at the beginning so that even when you click the button and to push it down, I want it to always know any cell. I want it to always turn off that event listener when you lift up or mouse up so you aren't clicking anymore. So underneath my puzzle buttons down here in my initialize, because this is really important to have this on our onload, I'm going to add an event listener. For mouse up. Technically, I could put this after the setup. It doesn't actually matter much where we put it as long as it happens after the puzzle buttons have been created because we're going to need those. And we are going to say document, add event listener. Now, this is the fun part. We're going to just do it to the document. So if I'm in the document, remember the way the DOM works with it all being hierarchical. If I am in the DOM and I'm in the document and I see a mouse up event, I want it to do end background. What's going to work with this is that no matter when, which cell I'm in, the cell is not going to matter. What's going to matter is that I'm in the document somewhere and my mouse came up, so I'm going to use the end background at that point. Now I'm going to go build my end background. So we have extend background there. We're going to do our end background. Function end background. And all this is going to do is remove that event listener that we're using. You don't need to pass the E event. I am because I have it. I always do. But in this case, that's fine. So we're going to remove the event listener for all cells. We're going to use that for loop again. In fact, I could even come over here, grab that for loop, copy, come back down here, paste, because I need the same for loop. And then for each puzzle cell, I am going to remove event listener of mouse enter and extend background. So I'm telling it I want that to go away when end background gets called. End background will get called whenever I lift my mouse up. So, oh, Lord. Might help if I can remember my own rules. So now that we fixed our E, we can come over here and I can click down, drag, let go, and now I can come over to these and it doesn't do it. I can do it again over here, let go, come over here, let go. So they click down. Every time you click down, it says, okay, anything you go around is going to be fine. Let's keep extending the background until you lift up. And as soon as you lift up, then we're going to remove that event listener. We're going to go ahead and prevent our default action for our events in our set background. As you noticed, when we came over here and I selected these, you see how it's selecting the whole row and it's doing this like selection thing, which is not what I want. I don't want it to do that. The reason why is because the default action of clicking a row is to select it like this. I don't want it to do that. I find that annoying. So we're going to do a prevent default on our set background function so that it doesn't do the default action when you get the mouse down. So underneath our for loop, we are going to prevent default action of table text, of selecting table text, because we don't want it to select it. We don't need it selected. We're not going to be copying and pasting. So we just don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go E dot prevent default. Open and close parenthesis. Now, doesn't do the default action. See how that works? Still does what I wanted. It clicked the things I wanted and it did that, but it isn't going to do that default action. In this one, we're talking about the different keyboard events. We've been doing a lot of mice so far. This is on the keyboard. So just like the mouse, you can use the keyboard. Events like pressing a single key, recording if it goes down, recording if it's released. These are different. So there is a key down, a key press, and a key up. All three of those are different pieces of information. So when you push the key, when it is pressed and released, which involves the actual letter being typed, or the act of it being released. And you can change around the options of different key events by selecting either the key down, key press, or key up as your event. Their list over here on the right shows you a couple of the different values of the properties that are on the left, based on whether it's a key press or a key down and a key up. Key down and key up generally go together, with key press being a little different. So as you can see, if I press an A, lowercase a, I get a character code of 97, but the key pressing or key down and key up doesn't get a character code. If I do a key code, I get the 97 and 122, even though I get the key code with key down and key up of 65 and 90. Those are ASCII. The other ones are ISO. So you can get different values. Be aware of whether you want the key code. Do you want the key? Do you want the character code? What is it you're looking for with the key that you've got? Remember, you're going to be passing an event, so that event is going to have things associated with it. Like in this case, a keyboard event is going to have a control key or a key code or a location. By the way, there is also the meta key, which is the Windows key. Or the comm key, the command key on the Mac, or you can have the shift, or you can have the control, or you can have the alt. So you can do special hotkeys if you want to in your code and have the hotkeys do something. So when you press Alt 6, it does something specific. So we can have keyboard events as well. Okay, we're going to respond to some keyboard events now, because the way that we're going to select cells is we're going to be using the Alt and Control keys. If you look over at the instructions or the directions over here, use the Alt key to mark empty cells, Shift as you drag. So that's how we're going to be marking things. So we're going to need some keyboard events. Again, inside of our set background. And our set background is going to be changing the background color based on whatever key is pressed. So if the control key is held down, do one thing. If the shift key is held down, do another. If none of them are, then do the third. So these are our options for our cell background that we're going to be setting. Now, what we're doing right now in set background is we're just setting the background color to gray. What we're going to do is pick different colors for that. So let's go down a little bit, because we're going to add in a couple of if statements here, and we're going to say set background based on keyboard key. Okay. If our E event shift key is pushed, so we can just say E shift key. So if our event has the shift key pressed, then we want to set our background, our cell background, equal to, and in this case, we're going to do RGB, inside quotes, RGB 233-207-29. Okay, that's if you hold down the shift key. So erasing holds down the shift key to erase. So that'll go back to the yellow. Else, if E Alt key. So if we hold down the Alt key when we do this, then we're going to set our cell background equal to RGB 255, 255, 255. Anybody know what 255, 255, 255 is? Yeah, me too. Okay. Otherwise, I am going to go ahead and set my cell background to the 101, which I already have here. So I'm going to X that there. Come back over here. So if I don't hold down anything, I want it to go gray. If I hold down the shift, I want it to go back to yellow. And if I hold down the alt, that is going to be marked empty. So let's test real quick to be able to show how the alt shift not pushing anything is going to work. So click. You can see this is just normal. If I hold down shift, shift is going to erase my guesses. So it's going to go back. See how it goes back? Then I go back. And then if I hit shift, just that. And then if I want to set something as white, I'll go ahead and hit alt. And that means that it's empty. So I can do that. Back to my shift to check that. And that works. Make sure that you get your semicolons correct. Along with keyboards, we're going to go into cursor styles. You've already noticed, I hope, that your cursor style changes in certain situations. If you go over a link, it switches from the default, which is a pointer, to the hand, which is also called a pointer. So the little arrow is the default, and the little hand we call the pointer. We can also do the crosshairs. We can do the resize buttons, so the different ones there. We can have the weight button. The little text button, so on and so forth, all these different cursor styles. You actually just set them with a basic CSS tag of cursor. So cursor is just the CSS attribute, and you can set it to one of these styles or an actual URL if you want to use a custom style for your cursor. By the way, when you use a custom style for a cursor, it's always good to have a secondary option. So we do, in this case, URL with whatever your URL is, and then a comma, and then what do you want the default to be if there's a problem getting the URL? That way you can change it from pointer to default or whatever if you have a problem. So sometimes if it's a link and you don't want it to be a hand, you can change it to something else. If you want to do the mouse down, it usually changes to crosshairs or so you can drag. You can have options like this. So this is where you can manually change your style cursor as you go along. The last thing we're going to do in this session is work on our cursors. So the base cursor that we have here is a pointer, and that's fine, but we have some really cool little icons. Our little eraser, our little pencil, and our little cross that we want to use. So we're going to switch out our cursor for those icons. So first thing we're going to do is come on up here, and we are going to set our cursor equal to our pencil. So we can use the URL that we have for our icon, our JPF pencil. And if it doesn't work for any reason, if they can't find the image, I want to go ahead and use the pointer one. So that's going to be the first one. So this is in our setup where we're just going to start at the beginning. So when I do this, I can come over here, refresh, and now I've got this cute little pencil. And it's only on those puzzle cells because I put that as in the puzzle cells, set the cursor to this. So that's what the default is for that. But the rest of the page, it just looks like a normal cursor. But we only have that in our setup puzzle here. We also want to do it when you push the keyboard down. We want to change because remember I said we had a little eraser and we have a little cross. So we're going to come down here to our set background. When we changed our cell background here, if the user has pressed down the shift key, we want to be able to use that icon. So we're going to put a little cursor type as a variable, a local variable inside of our set background. And we're going to go ahead and add the pointer with the pencil. I'm sorry, that's just a copy paste. We're going to do the eraser with a cell if it doesn't work with the regular eraser. So we're going to do that if it's a shift. So if it's shifting, we're erasing. That's what we want it to do. If it's alting, we want it to mark it as empty. So we're going to do a little cross, and we're going to do a crosshair as the alternative. So we're going to copy and paste, and then we're going to replace those with cross and crosshair so we can use the image that we want. Finally, if you have nothing held down, I want it to be that pencil. So we're going to go ahead and do that in our cursor type for not holding anything down. So now we've added all three of these as a variable called cursor type. We have to actually apply the cursor type somewhere the same way we applied the background. So we applied the background here saying we want to do that, but we want to do this for all of the cells because we want it to stay whatever cursor type we come up with. So we are going to go ahead down below in our event listener for our puzzle cell and add in a cursor of whatever cursor type we have decided at this point. Okay, this is good, except there's one little problem. We have to be able to set the cursor type back to the pointer if we end up stopping from doing our click down and click up. So in our end background, we're also going to add setting our cursor back to that pointer. So it's back to the pointer now. If you lift up with the mouse, if the mouse is pushed down, it will be the other one. So I can hit refresh. Now, as I click, that's still fine. If I hold down the shift button, it makes this little eraser. As soon as I let go, it goes back to the pencil. If I hold down the Alt button, it does the little X. Now, yes, the little X is a little bit off on this one because I'm on Edge. It actually works a lot better on Chrome. So again, if I hold down the eraser button, it'll do all of the erasing until I decide to let go, and then it goes back. Hopefully that was a little bit interesting with your mice and your cursors and your keyboards. Let's move on to the last session and finish up our project.